Hi there, it's me, Finn, and tonight, we're going to talk about something quietly strange. Something that you might have heard of before, but never quite like this. Pause. Ancient Rome was full of noise, of marching soldiers, clinking coins, public speeches, and of course law. A lot of law, and where there is law, well, there are punishments. You might know the Romans were strict, that they had gladiators, or crucifixions, or exile. Pause. But did you know that some punishments were, just plain odd? Not scary, not loud, just, weird. Like being sewn inside a sack, with a monkey, a snake, a rooster, and a dog. Pause. Or being forced to sit silently, in complete stillness, while slowly starving, as the crowd passed by. Or, simply being slapped across the face, by a slave. Yup, really happened. These weren't always done for fun, and they weren't always cruel. Sometimes, they were strange forms of justice. Strange forms of control. Strange forms of teaching lessons. And tonight, you'll hear all about them, gently, calmly, piece by piece, as we sink, softly, into the minds of the Roman people. Let's start by subscribing, pause, and then we'll drift into Rome. The early streets of Rome were dusty, crowded, and filled with smells. You could hear sandals hitting the stone, carts creaking, people selling fruit, oil, wine, the smell of fish and sheep, mixing with roasted grains. And in the middle of it all, the Forum. The Roman Forum, a giant open space, surrounded by tall marble buildings and columns. It was here that many punishments began, not in some dark dungeon, but in the open, in front of everyone. You see, Romans believed, if you were punished publicly, others would learn. Pause. It wasn't about hiding justice. No, it was about showing it, making it a lesson. And one of the first, and most bizarre, forms of punishment, in early Rome, was something called the poena colae. That name might sound fancy. But it means the punishment of the sack. This wasn't any old sack. No, this was a sewn leather bag. And what they did with it. Well, you won't forget. Let's say, someone had committed parricide, the murder of their own father, or mother, or even close family. Now, the Romans saw this as one of the worst crimes imaginable. Pause. Worse than theft, worse than lying to the Senate, even worse than treason. If caught, the criminal would be stripped down, tied up, and sewn inside that bag. But not alone. Nope, they'd be joined by a rooster, a monkey, a dog, and a snake. Yes, 4 animals. Pause. 4 confused, angry, frightened animals, all trapped in a tight leather sack with a human inside. The punishment didn't end there. Oh, no, the entire bag, with the human, and the animals squirming inside, was thrown into the river. Strange, isn't it? Why those animals? Why not a goat, or a cat? Why those 4? Well, no one knows for sure, but historians think they were symbolic. The monkey was for madness, the rooster for wakefulness and betrayal, the dog for loyalty, broken, and the snake for silent death. It's so bizarre, isn't it? Like a myth, like a dream. But, it was real. It was law. And that wasn't even the most public punishment. Imagine now, a quiet courtyard, behind the walls of a villa. It's warm, the air is still, you hear the soft rustle of a fig tree in the wind, and maybe the sound of sandals walking on stone. Here, inside the shaded garden, stands a wealthy Roman man, his toga perfectly wrapped, his expression calm, and in front of him, a small boy, trembling. This child, maybe a slave, maybe a servant, had spilled wine on his master's scrolls. What would happen? Would he be whipped? Sent away? No. Sometimes, just sometimes, the punishment would be even stranger. The master would instruct the boy to walk backwards, in silence, around the courtyard, 50 times. Not run, not march, just walk, backwards. Quietly, no talking. And if he tripped, he'd have to start over. Now, That doesn't sound painful, right? But it was exhausting, embarrassing, and very Roman. Romans believed that punishment didn't have to hurt the body to change the mind. Sometimes, the shame, the silence, the stillness was enough. You might be thinking, that doesn't sound so bad. And in some cases, it wasn't. But there were others. Other punishments that were stranger still. Have you heard of the tunica molesta? It means the annoying tunic. Such a soft name for such a hot punishment. Pause. This was a tunic made of flammable cloth, covered in pitch, in oil, in tar. And when worn, the person inside could barely move, their arms bound, their chest tight. And then, faint pause. It was lit, yes, but not immediately. First, they were paraded through the streets. People watched, some threw flower petals, others laughed, some cried. There was no single reaction, just noise and eyes. And when the time came, the fire was lit. Strange, isn't it? Why a tunic? Why not a stake? Again, symbolism. To the Romans, the tunic represented identity. What you wore told others who you were. And so, this burning tunic was your identity, your soul being erased, slowly, painfully. But let's not stay in that moment too long. Let's wander instead to a quiet street at night. The moon is rising, the lamps have gone dim. A soldier stands guard, and across the alley, you see a man kneeling in front of a wooden sign. He's been there for hours. He's not chained. He's not hurt. He's just kneeling. His crime? He had told a lie about his commander. And so, he must kneel, in front of a sign that says, I lied. And now I kneel, all night, all through the chill. As people walk by, some smile, some ignore him. It's not violent, but it's harsh, in its own quiet way. This punishment was called obscura expositia, the punishment of quiet exposure. You'd be seen, but you'd do nothing. No crying, no speaking, just silent pause. We're only scratching the surface, and already, you can feel it, can't you? How strange, how eerie, how bizarre the punishments of Rome could be. But they weren't just for criminals. Sometimes, even the senators, the rich and powerful, were punished too. Not with sacks, not with tunics, but with banquets. Yes, punished with a meal. You won't believe this. There was a form of public shame, called the Feast of Fools. A man of high rank, perhaps a general who failed, or a noble who lied, would be invited to a grand feast. But, when he arrived, the table would be empty. The cups would be filled with vinegar, the plates, with stale bread, and the chairs, all too small. Everyone would eat, in silence, slowly, pretending that the food was grand. And the punished man, he would be expected to smile, to chew, to nod, as if everything was fine. It was subtle, it was calm, it was utterly humiliating. Rome knew how to break a man's pride without lifting a sword. And so, the night stretches on. There are more stories, of course. Many more, like the woman forced to wear a donkey's ears on her head for gossiping too much, or the baker who had to sweep the entire street with a broom made of feathers, or the singer who sang badly and was made to sing in silence. Yes, made to sing in silence. How? By sewing his lips shut with golden thread. Strange, quiet, Roman. It's getting quiet now. The forum is empty. The moon has risen high above the temple of Saturn. Let's rest here, just for a moment. Silent pause. Tomorrow, we'll wander deeper into the world of strange punishments, into the Senate halls, into the bathhouses, into the army camps, where justice took on forms even more strange than these. But for now, rest. Let the strangeness of Rome fade and drift. The fire from the oil lamps was still glowing softly across the old Roman stones, as the wind carried the faintest scent of olives and ash down the narrow alleys. You're still here. That's good, because, where we left off, The streets of Rome had already shown us how strange their punishments could be. Pause. But we haven't even stepped inside the temples or the law halls or the military camps. And believe me, that's where some of the truly unusual things happened. Tonight, we'll wander further. Let's begin. At the Temple of Vesta. Now, the Temple of Vesta was not like any other. It was circular, small, quiet, with flames that never went out. And inside lived the Vestal virgins, 6 women, chosen as young girls, sworn to remain untouched for 30 years. 30 silent years. And if they broke that vow, if even once they were found to have been with a man, their punishment was not death by sword, not fire, not exile. No, they were buried alive. Yes, you wouldn't believe it, but they would be gently led, not dragged, not beaten, but quietly walked to a small underground chamber just outside the city walls. There, they'd be given a lamp, some water, a little bread, and a couch. The entrance sealed behind them, not loudly, not quickly, but slowly, stone by stone, until it was dark and still. The Romans believed that since the Vestal had broken her sacred vow, the gods themselves should judge her fate, and so they left her alive, in silence, to let the divine decide. That silence must have been heavy. And strange, isn't it, how gently they performed it? No crowd, no shouting, just ritual. Now, step back into the city. It's midday now. The forum is bustling. The market buzzes with voices. You hear apples being sold, sandals scraping on stone, and someone shouting prices for honey cakes. Amidst this, a small platform is being built. Nothing dramatic, just wooden steps, and a chair. And who's that sitting down? It's a lazy official. This man, a city magistrate, had been caught napping during trials. Instead of removing him from office, or punishing him in private, the Senate passed something called the Chair of Disgrace. Each day, for 1 week, he would sit on a high chair in the middle of the forum. Pause. Not tied, not insulted, just sitting, and anyone passing by, could walk up to him, and tell a short joke. Yes, a joke, and he had to laugh. He was not allowed to frown. He was not allowed to look serious. He had to smile, and laugh, even when the jokes were cruel, even when they stung. And the people loved it. It wasn't violent. It wasn't loud, but it was deeply Roman. Punishment through shame. Punishment through performance. Punishment through humor. Strange, isn't it? Now let's walk again, this time, towards the docks. Here, near the river Tiber, where boats swayed gently in the current, and fishermen threw nets into the water, lived the fish sellers. Now these sellers were known to sometimes cheat. A fish weighed too little, or the scales tipped the wrong way. And so, the city created a strange law. Every month, the cheating fish sellers would gather, and one of them, chosen by drawing a pebble from a bowl, would be made to wear a fish on his head. Yes, a large fish, strapped like a helmet. He would walk from the river, through the markets, past the forum, and all the way to the top of Capitoline Hill. And people would follow, not yelling, just humming. A slow, soft, tuneless hum. All the way up. Then, when he reached the top, he had to bow to the statue of Jupiter, and say, "Even the gods smell better than I do," and walk down again. No jail, no beating. Just a journey, a fish hat, and a hum. Sometimes, the punishment wasn't just to hurt the body, but to tickle the mind, to nudge the heart, to shape the soul. Let's move again. This time, to the baths. Roman baths were noisy, steamy places, hot water, cold water, people shouting, laughing, gossiping. But not all bath visitors were polite. Some would leave without paying, some would splash, some even tried to steal oil, and for these people, a strange punishment was invented. It was called the slipper parade. Here's how it worked. Let's say someone had misbehaved in the baths. They would be asked to come back the next day, wearing only slippers, nothing else. just soft leather sandals. Then, they'd be led, slowly, gently, through the bathhouse corridors, past the cold pool, the hot pool, and finally, through the crowded dressing rooms. And as they walked, each person they passed would say just one word, a word chosen by the magistrates. It might be oily, or drippy, or splash, and everyone would say it, softly, like a whisper. Splash, splash, splash. The person would not be struck, would not be grabbed, just watched, and labeled, like a living whisper, a floating word. It's strange how softly the Romans could punish, so creative, so symbolic. Now, let's travel far from the city, past the fields, past the aqueducts, to the edges of the empire, where the soldiers lived. Yes, the Roman legions, disciplined, hard, quiet. But, when one soldier broke formation, or dropped his shield in training, they didn't always beat him. No, sometimes, they used something called decimation. You might think you know what this is, but the full story is even more bizarre. Let's say one unit, maybe 100 men, had run from battle. The commander would line them up. They would each draw lots, and then, 1 in every 10, would be chosen. Those chosen would not be executed by the commanders. No, they'd be killed by their own unit, by their own friends. But, in the rarest cases, they weren't killed, just ignored. For 1 week, the chosen man would be treated as invisible. No one would speak to him. No one would eat with him. No one would hand him food, or water, or even look at him. He would march alone, sleep alone, and eat only what he could find himself. Some said, it was worse than death, to be unseen, unacknowledged, untouched. Strange, so quiet, and so powerful. Back in the city, there were punishments for writers too. Poets, storytellers. If a poet wrote something false about the emperor, they weren't jailed, or whipped. Sometimes, they were made to perform their own poems backwards. Yes, each word, backwards, in front of a crowd. And the crowd would be asked not to laugh, not to clap, not to move, just to sit and listen, in total silence. And the poet? He would stumble, fumble, forget, sweat. Not a sound from the crowd, just the sound of his own awkward voice. A punishment of confusion, of memory, of performance. Now let's visit a Roman school. A small room, a wax tablet, a teacher, and a student who had misbehaved, thrown ink, shouted in class. For him, the punishment was a simple one. A walk around the building, but not just a walk, a scroll walk. He would carry a long scroll, stretched out between his arms. If he dropped it, he'd start again. If the wind blew, he had to chase it. The scroll might be 10 feet long, maybe 12, maybe 30, all handwritten, and the child would circle the school until he completed it, quietly, with the soft sound of parchment dragging across the stone. There were more, of course. So many more. A woman who had cheated in dice games, forced to roll dried peas across the forum, picking up only the ones that landed on their edges. A man who shouted too loud in debates, ordered to whisper for 1 year. A merchant who cheated on his scales, made to carry a fake wooden scale, tied to his back, for an entire market day. So many little things, soft punishments, creative, thoughtful, eerie, and somehow sleepily strange. Rome was full of rules, but even more full of imagination. And as the night deepens, the stars return to the sky, the fires go out in the temples, and the last sandals click down the stones. You can still feel it, can't you? That quiet Roman rhythm, slow, symbolic, and very, very strange. The night over Rome deepens, darker now, but soft. A breeze moves through the tall cypress trees, brushing against old rooftops, fluttering the hanging fabric signs of small bakeries and spice shops that have long since closed for the day. You can still hear, faintly, the sound of sandals in the distance, echoing gently off the stone. Somewhere in the city, someone is still being punished. Not loudly, not harshly, but in the Roman way, quietly, with meaning. Let's return, gently now, to a space we've not entered yet. The home. Yes, Roman homes were not like ours. Some were grand villas, with mosaic floors. Others were small and narrow apartments, stacked 5 stories high, made of wood and plaster, and filled with the scents of cooked lentils, wet stone, and the faint bitter smell of olive oil. And inside these homes, small punishments took place. You see, the Roman family was not just a group of people living together. It was a unit, a law. The paterfamilias, the father, had full legal power over everyone under his roof. He could marry his children off. He could cancel their weddings. He could even, in some cases, punish them in ways the city never saw, and that led to something called the Silent Bowl. Let's imagine a son, maybe 15 years old, had spoken back to his mother, not yelled, just disrespected her, perhaps over dinner. Now, instead of being struck or lectured, he'd be invited the next morning to breakfast, and there at the table would be one bowl, ceramic, plain, with nothing in it but water and crushed barley. He'd be asked to eat, but no one would speak to him. No one would sit near him. No one would look at him. Even the servants would walk quietly. He'd finish his meal, stand, leave, still, not a word. This would go on for 3 days. A punishment, not of pain, but of absence, of stillness, of being surrounded by people, and still being alone. It was deeply Roman, and deeply strange. Let's walk now, down the tight alleys behind the bakeries and laundry shops. It's late morning, children are chasing each other with clay marbles, and a small crowd has gathered around a wooden stool. On it sits a man, middle-aged, dusty robe, sweating, and next to him, a large stone bowl filled with water and herbs. But this is no medicine. This is the bowl of truth. Let's say this man had been accused of telling lies about a neighbor, saying that his neighbor stole something, when he didn't. The punishment? He would have to sit on the stool, place his hands in the bowl, and remain completely still. No blinking, no flinching, not even when the herbs started to itch, and the sun beat down on his neck, and the water became lukewarm. He would sit, and the crowd would watch. Children would whisper, old women would hum, a dog might bark, once, but no one would speak directly to him. This might go on for 2 hours, 3, 4. At any point, he could admit the lie and leave. But if he stayed, silently, by sundown, he was forgiven. Not in writing, not by court, but by the people. Strange? Yes, but also peaceful. And now, we drift to a new place. Outside the walls, near the fields, past the workers tending grapevines, and the men herding pigs toward the market. You'll find the stone gate, an old archway, no longer used for soldiers or wagons. And there, once a month, you'd see a group of women, sitting, quiet, each with a bundle of wool and a mirror. These were the gossipers. That's what they were called. Women who had spoken too freely, spread rumors, whispered in the baths, or wine shops. Their punishment? To sit in front of the stone gate, weaving small strands of wool, while looking only at themselves. Yes, not at each other, only into the mirror. And if they broke eye contact, they'd have to unravel the wool and begin again. That might not sound so harsh, but imagine the summer heat, the dust, the way your arms begin to ache, and the faces in the mirror, staring back, reminding you of your words. It was a punishment of reflection, quite literally, and very Roman. Let's return now to the city proper, to the theater, a large stone circle, with rows and rows of wooden benches, and a stage filled with actors. Rome loved its drama, but sometimes, the punishment wasn't for the actors. It was for the audience. Let's say a group of young boys had snuck in, without tickets. Instead of being dragged out or beaten, they were cast. Yes, they were placed into the next play, given lines, given costumes. But the play would be nonsense. It would be written that morning. It would make no sense at all. And the boys? They'd be told to perform it seriously, in front of a full crowd, and the crowd would not laugh, because they were told not to. So the boys would stumble, get confused, stand awkwardly under the hot sun, and perform nonsense to complete silence. It was called the play of shame, a quiet stage, a loud lesson, and no scripts survived. Perhaps that's for the best. Now, let's walk into the gardens of the wealthy, behind their villas, where the lemon trees grow, and small fountains bubble. You'll find marble statues, tall ones, elegant, but sometimes, one statue would look strange, its head replaced, not broken, replaced with a clay pot. This was called the fool's bust. If a servant had lied, or failed to carry out an order, the master would not yell. Instead, he would remove a statue's head, and replace it with the servant's name etched on the clay, and guests would walk by, and nod, and say nothing, and after 7 days, the head would be returned. No words, no punishments, just the silent reminder that you were made into a decoration. It's almost strange how elegant the Romans could be, even in punishment. So creative, so calm, so cold. But let's not forget that the bazaar wasn't always serious. Sometimes, it was playful, in the festivals of Saturnalia. When slaves were treated as masters for one day, there was a punishment for masters who took themselves too seriously. They would be dressed as donkeys, robes and all. And the slaves, they'd ride on their backs, singing songs, for one day. And the master, he had to smile, laugh, join in. If he refused, he would be made to eat dinner from the floor, with a spoon made of bread. A strange reversal, a bizarre but joyful humiliation. And it reminded the Romans that power was only real if others let it be. That's a heavy thought for such a light day. Let's take one last walk tonight, one last street. It's narrow and wet from the fountain spray. We pass a man holding a clay mask. He's not wearing it. He's carrying it. Why? Because last week, he insulted a performer. And now, as punishment, he must carry the face of the one he mocked. The mask of the mime, the dancer, the singer. Everywhere he goes, for 7 days, he doesn't speak. He doesn't smile. He just carries the face, softly, silently, like a reminder that words are like stones. Once thrown, they land, and sometimes, they leave a mark. And now, Rome quiets again. The wind picks up across the rooftops. The stars shimmer through soft clouds. A dog barks, once, far away, and a lantern flickers out. Somewhere, someone is still being punished, but not cruelly, not loudly, just, in the Roman way, quietly, creatively, bizarrely. Asleep now, there's more to see, but not tonight. We'll continue again soon. The sun has barely risen over the rooftops of ancient Rome. A gentle pink glow rolls across the cracked clay tiles and sleepy rooftops. Birds chirp softly above the temple of Jupiter, and a few merchants are beginning to unpack dates and dried olives from their carts. Rome is waking, but even in this quiet, there are rules. There are always rules, and when rules are broken, the Romans had 1,000 interesting ways to remind people of them. Let's begin this morning, near the public latrines. Yes, not glamorous, but very Roman. Rome was famous for its public bathrooms, long benches of stone, with dozens of small holes carved into them, flowing water underneath, and open-air walls that let sunlight flood in. People would sit, chat, even conduct business there. But sometimes, people overstayed their visit. Maybe they napped, or sang, or, wrote poetry on the walls. So, a punishment was created, a very unusual one. The offender would be made to return the next morning, wearing a full laurel wreath on his head, and he would be asked to recite a poem. But not just any poem. It would be written by the public. Yes, random strangers would contribute a single line each. The result? A strange, chaotic, silly poem about latrines and figs and lost sandals, and the man would have to stand on a little step beside the toilet and read it out loud with pride. That was the key. He couldn't frown. He couldn't hurry. He had to read it like it was a work of great genius. The people loved it. It was silly, gentle, a social joke, one that left no scars, just blushes. But it stayed with you. The smell, the sound, the laughter. Punishment, disguised as performance. Classic Rome. Now let's drift away from the city, down the Appian Way, past cypress trees, past quiet tombs, to a small village, near a vineyard. Here lived the wine testers, men and women, who worked for noble families, tasting wine before it was served at banquets, checking for poison or bad grapes. But what happened when a tester lied? When he said a wine was good, but it wasn't, the punishment, he would become the decanter. Here's how it worked. He'd dress in white robes, with grapes stitched into the fabric. Then, during the next banquet, instead of serving wine from a jug, the wine would be poured into a glass funnel, and that funnel would be strapped to his head. Yes, he would walk from guest to guest, slowly bending forward, letting them pour their cups directly from the wine funnel on his crown. He could not speak. He could not flinch. He simply served, quiet, dignified, like a human wine fountain. For one evening, then, he was forgiven, and often, tipped quite well. Rome was strange like that. Punish, then pay. Let's head back now, into the libraries. Quiet spaces filled with scrolls, thick parchment, shelves carved from cedar. The Roman libraries. So peaceful, but they had rules too, and the worst offenders. The scroll crumplers, people who rolled the scrolls too tightly, or snapped them shut, or spilled ink on them. You wouldn't believe it, but the punishment for such a person was called the scroll walk. Yes, we've heard a form of this before, but this one was different. Here, the offender would be given a scroll, not with words, but with a drawing, a map, of the library. Each section, each category, and they would walk, very slowly, retracing the scroll's map, and if they went too fast, or got confused, they started again. Librarians watched, quiet, patient, and once the walk was complete, the scroll was burned, symbolically, not as anger, but as closure. You crumpled a scroll, now, you walk one, to the end. So soft, so symbolic, so very Roman. Let's drift further, to the markets, the spice stalls, the olive sellers, and especially, the breadmen. Bakers were respected in Rome. Bread was life. But if a baker cheated the weights, if a loaf was too small, there was a very peculiar punishment waiting. The loaf parade. It sounds cheerful, and it was, in a strange way. The baker would be asked to bake a single, giant loaf, as large as a barrel, heavy, dense, and he would carry it on his back, through the entire market. But here's the twist. He couldn't touch it. It was suspended from a frame, a wooden bar over his shoulders, with the loaf tied behind him, just brushing the ground. If it fell, he started again. If he stopped, children would shout, "Unjust weight, unjust weight." And when he finally reached the end, he had to donate the loaf to the temple servants. That was Rome's way of saying, bread is sacred, weights matter, and justice can come in warm, doughy forms. And what about the coin shavers? People who shaved bits of silver or gold off coins to melt and resell? Well, they didn't go to prison. Instead, they were made to wear the shavings. A small pouch, clear, made of glass beads, filled with the very metal they stole. And that pouch hung from their necks. For a week, everyone saw it, everyone knew. And when the week was over, the pouch was melted and poured into a mold to make a single new coin, stamped with the letters P pecunia expiata, money redeemed. Some of those coins still exist, tiny, strange, quiet symbols of guilt turned to gold. And what of children? Rome punished children differently. They believed in shame, not fear. So when a child was caught stealing fruit or skipping lessons, they were given the chalk mask, a plain wooden board with eye holes covered in white chalk dust. tied gently to the face. And they would sit, in the forum, near a teacher's stand, reading, softly, out loud, from a book about honesty. The people walking by, they'd nod, or listen, but no one mocked. That was part of it. Punishment, not to humiliate, but to grow. Rome didn't always get it right, but they thought about it. They tried to shape people. Let's finish with something odd. Something beautiful and strange. A punishment for arrogance. Yes, in some noble families, if a member had become too proud, too boastful, they were given the mirror room. It was a small room, filled with polished bronze mirrors. And in the middle, a stool. The person would sit, alone, for 1 hour, and simply look at themselves, at their reflection. No one spoke, no one entered, and when the hour was up, they left. That's all. No scolding, no judgment, just a quiet hour of self. Some said it changed people, some said it broke them, but many came out in tears, not from pain, but from something else. From meeting themselves, face to face. The wind is rising now. You can hear it through the bathhouse windows, through the trees, lining the aqueducts, rustling the hanging banners over the temples. And in every quiet corner, someone is serving their time. Not in chains, not with screams, but softly, strangely, in the Roman way. We've walked far tonight, through books, bread, mirrors, and masks, and Rome still has more secrets. But for now, let your thoughts soften, let your breath slow, let the weight of these stories settle around you like a woolen blanket, and rest, because sleep is the gentlest justice of all. The night air in Rome tonight is soft, warm, and still. You can almost smell the sweetness of baked honey cakes left cooling on window sills, and the gentle smoke of olive wood fires curling through the alleys. The lanterns are low, and the city whispers as if it's dreaming too. But, somewhere in that sleepy city, another punishment is beginning, not loudly, not with chains or cries, but in a Roman way. Quiet, public, and just a little bit strange. Let's begin tonight, near the Tiber River. Its waters glide slowly under marble bridges, reflecting torchlight like a trail of broken gold. Here, you'd sometimes find the river weighers. These were men assigned to check weights on traded goods. Sacks of grain, amphorae of wine, baskets of dates. If the scale tipped too light, and it was found to be a trick, they weren't whipped. No, the punishment was known as the stone sit. Here's how it worked. The guilty man would carry the very same weight he had lied about, exactly to the ounce, and walk with it, slowly, to the middle of the river bridge. There, waiting, was a large flat stone platform. He'd sit, he'd place the weight on his lap, and there, he'd stay, all day. People walked by, some nodded, others didn't look, but the weight remained, and only when the sun dipped low, and the lamps began to flicker, would a clerk come by, record his time, and say balance returned. Then he could go. No shouting, no fine, just a quiet reminder that what you steal sits with you. Now let's drift through the military camp, far outside the city walls. Rome's legions were not just fighters, they were builders, farmers, scribes, and deeply disciplined. But what happened when a soldier broke silence? Say, he laughed too loudly during drills, or sang when he wasn't meant to. He would not be beaten. Instead, he'd be assigned shadow watch. Shadow watch was simple. The soldier was to follow his own shadow. Yes, at dawn, he'd be stationed in a clear field. His orders, walk in such a way that his shadow never disappeared. If it did, start again. He could not step into thick shade, could not turn quickly, could not look away, and the commanding officer would watch from a small platform nearby, marking down moments of failure, all morning, and if he succeeded, he was forgiven. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't painful. But it was tiring, confusing, endless. Like chasing yourself. Which, perhaps, was the point. Closer to the city again. We step into a soapmaker's alley, a place of boiling cauldrons, thick perfumes, and clouds of steam rolling into the streets. Here, a punishment called the scent trial took place. Let's say a merchant sold fake perfume, watered down rose oil, or falsely labeled frankincense. The Senate might assign him to the scent trial. For one day he'd sit on a high stool, surrounded by 20 open vials, nose open, eyes closed, and every few minutes, someone would offer a new scent. His job? To identify it correctly. Rose, myrrh, vinegar, garlic, musk. If he guessed wrong, he'd dab that scent on his skin, until, by afternoon, his entire body smelled like confusion. A walking swirl of smells. The punishment? Embarrassment. And the return of truth. You wouldn't believe it unless you saw it. People followed him home, sniffing, not laughing loudly, just quietly, curiously. A reminder that lies always linger. Let's walk on to the Temple of Saturn. It's dusk now. The columns cast long shadows across the plaza, and the fires are burning low. And inside, a group of scribes are cleaning ink pots and sealing scrolls. But one of them has made a mistake. Not a big one. A miswritten date on an offering record. So, he must face the ink circle. A beautiful punishment. Here's how it worked. At dawn, a circle would be drawn on the stone floor. In dark blue-black ink, a spiral, perfectly coiled, and the scribe, barefoot, would walk the spiral inwards, slowly, softly, reciting lines from the 12 tables. Rome's first laws. When he reached the center, he'd bow, wait 1 minute, and walk back out. This would take 2 hours, maybe 3, but at the end, he would be handed a fresh, clean scroll, and the mistake would be forgiven. There's something beautiful in that. A punishment, that's also a ritual, that's also a meditation. Now we move on, to a tiny garden, behind a bakery. Yes, simple, quiet. But even here, Rome had a strange tradition, the feather seat. Let's say a child had stolen a plum tart. Instead of scolding him, the baker would prepare a stool, covered in feathers, soft, silky, gentle, and the child would sit, with bare feet in a bowl of flour. No talking, just sitting, for 1 hour, and passers-by, they would gently shake a bell as they passed. A soft, clear sound. Ting, ting, the sound of stolen sweetness. And when the bell ringing stopped, so did the punishment. Then the child was invited to sweep the shop, taste a proper tart, and help wrap the bread for delivery. Even the smallest punishment could become a lesson, and a kindness. But not all were so kind. Let's step now into the archives, where clay tablets and scrolls filled entire walls. Here, a man was caught forging a date, changing a birth year on a family record. The punishment, not jail, not a fine, but a sentence of silence. Called the mute scroll, the man was given a scroll, blank. He was to write without ink, etch, with a dry reed, words no one could read. He would do this, from dawn to dusk, each line invisible, each thought unrecorded, and when the scroll was full, he had to read it aloud, as if the words were real, as if the scroll wasn't blank. The audience? Clerks, and they listened, then nodded, and let him go. You wouldn't believe such things were real, but they were. Rome was a city of symbols. Let's walk once more, to a little square, where musicians gather, where people laugh, under lanterns. And one man is standing on a box, eyes closed, hands lifted. He is the echo singer. That's his punishment, for shouting insults in the theater. Now, for 7 nights, he must stand and sing only what others say. He cannot speak first, only echo. If someone whispers peace, he sings peace. If someone mutters shame, he sings shame. And the people give him words, soft words, sometimes strange, but never cruel. And his voice carries over rooftops, into the night, and becomes something beautiful. That's how Rome worked. Punishment turned into poetry. Justice turned into story. Ah. And now, it's late again. The bathhouse is empty. The dogs have curled beneath stairs. The bakeries are quiet. And even the temples seem to sleep. Somewhere in the city, a man is walking backwards down a street, carrying a fish, or a scroll, or a whisper. And the stars above? They say nothing. They only watch. Sleep, now. For tomorrow, we'll wander deeper still, into the strangest corners of Rome, where even the silence carried weight. There's a slow hush falling across the forum tonight. The marble columns glow under torchlight, casting long sleepy shadows across the stone. The scent of warm wax drips gently through the alleyways. Somewhere, in the distance, a lyre strums softly from an open window. Rome is winding down, but the strangeness, that never really sleeps. Tonight, we walk again through the side of Rome. Most people don't remember, where punishment wasn't just about pain, but about ideas, images, meanings, and some of them were so quiet, you'd miss them if you blinked. Let's begin now in a place most Romans knew well, the bathhouse, but not the big public ones. No, this one is smaller, tiled in faded blue, steam rising gently through the stone ceiling vents. And in one corner there is a bench, narrow, with lines carved into it. This is where the line sitters served their punishment. Who were they? Mostly men, who rushed, who pushed their way into the bath, skipped the line, shouted for soap too early. Rome was serious about its bathing order, so these offenders were made to return the next morning and sit on the line bench. Every 5 minutes, they would shift one space down, slowly tracing the carved path, like a train on invisible rails. They could not speak, could not close their eyes, and every so often, someone would place a fresh towel across their shoulders, to remind them what they were waiting for. When they reached the final spot, they were allowed a bath, and only then. It was simple, clean, and oddly polite, a reminder that time flows like water. Now let's drift through a grove just outside the city walls. The olive trees here sway gently in the evening breeze, their silver leaves whispering secrets through the dark. This grove, it belonged to the truth seekers, not a cult, but a punishment group, formed to deal with a very Roman crime, false boasting. Yes, boasting. Rome despised empty words. So when someone, usually a merchant or young noble, exaggerated his deeds too far, he would be summoned to the grove and told, tell the story again, but slowly, and with truth. He would stand in the grove, barefoot, surrounded by listeners, sometimes strangers, sometimes friends. He would begin, I once sold a ship full of pepper, and a voice would gently say, are you sure? And he'd begin again. This could take hours. They were never rude, never mocking, just present, like mirrors in the dark. And by the end, the story was smaller, simpler, but real. And he would leave, lighter. And the trees? They remembered nothing. Only the wind. Let's walk back into the city, to a bakery. Not for bread this time, but for a curious Roman dessert. Fig cakes. Now imagine this. A vendor is caught using bad figs. Rotten, slimy. He is not fined, not jailed, but invited to participate in the fig weighing. Here's what happened. He was handed a tray of fresh, perfect figs. Each one weighed, and he was asked to eat them, until the combined weight matched the bad batch he tried to sell. That might sound like a reward, but after 15 or 20, the sweetness turned heavy, the texture sticky, the belly uncomfortable, and the audience, they didn't laugh. They just watched, patient, quiet, as he chewed, and finished the punishment he'd tried to feed to others. The last fig, always handed to him by a child, to remind him that every buyer could be young, trusting, innocent. Now, let's go deeper still, to the home of a sculptor, a man who worked in marble and wax. He'd once carved a likeness of a senator, but exaggerated his nose, not as a joke, but for praise, to flatter. And when it was discovered, He was invited to create another, but this time, he would sculpt himself, from wax, but without mirrors, without help, only memory, and he would present it, at the same spot where the statue of the senator stood, next to it, side by side, the senator's fine profile, and the sculptor's guess at his own. Some were accurate, some were not, but the message was clear. Truth is not a performance, and flattery is not art. Rome respected skill, but not deception. Now we come to something soft, and a little strange, a punishment for interrupting stories. Yes, in Rome, storytelling was sacred, passed down in villas and over meals, but if someone interrupted too often, cut off an elder, spoke too quickly, they were assigned to a ritual called the listening feast. Here's how it went. A meal would be arranged: bread, fruit, cheese, wine, delicious, but the person could not speak, not one. Instead, they would be surrounded by 4 storytellers, each telling a different tale, at the same time, one about war, one about love, one about gods, one about chickens, and the punished listener could only listen. They could not ask questions, could not nod, could not choose, only listen, until the stories ended. Then, and only then, they could ask one question, just one, and it had to be whispered. It was strange, silly, but deeply Roman. Words mattered, and so did silence. Let's walk now, to the fields beyond the city, where wheat grows tall, and shepherds hum soft songs to the goats. Here, once a year, there was a ritual punishment for hoarding grain. The offender would be brought to the edge of a field, handed a single grain, and asked to plant it, but not in the soil, on a marble tile. He would press it down, gently, then sit, and wait. Of course, nothing would grow, but he had to sit, until nightfall, and when the stars came out, he'd be given a sack of real seed, enough to share, enough to plant, and the people would nod. The punishment had passed. And now, we come again to the city, to the Bridge of Whispers, a narrow path over a stream, not famous, but important. It was used for a punishment known as the name wind. This was for those who slandered others. Whispers, lies, secrets. So for one evening, they would walk the bridge, alone, and from the shadows, people would whisper their own names. Only names, nothing more, and the offender was not allowed to respond, only walk, only listen. As dozens of names drifted past, names of those hurt by gossip, and when they reached the far end, they would speak their own name aloud, softly, and bow. That was all. But those who did it honestly said they never gossiped again. And so the night deepens. The stars sharpen, the streets go still, and the city exhales. Somewhere, someone is listening to stories. Someone is planting a grain on marble. Someone is chewing figs and thinking. Because in Rome, punishment wasn't always harsh, or loud, or brutal. Sometimes, it was thoughtful, reflective, even kind. Strange? Yes, but always meaningful. Always Roman. Sleep now. We've seen enough for one night. But when you wake, there will be more strange tales waiting for you. Just beyond the next street. The moon is riding high now. It casts silver light over Rome's rooftops, bathing its temples, baths, and alleyways in a soft glow. The marble steps of the Curia glisten slightly, as if dew has already begun to settle in the cracks. It's late, but Rome is never completely still. Somewhere, a door opens softly, a sandal scuffs against stone, and a punishment begins. Not a harsh one, no chains, no torches, just another quiet, odd, and completely Roman ritual, meant to balance the scales of dignity, shame, and memory. Let's start tonight near a candle maker's workshop. The air smells like beeswax, and something a little burnt. Soft golden light flickers behind wax-covered windows. Inside, there's a man who once claimed to light the longest burning candle in Rome. But it wasn't true. He had cheated, hidden an oil wick inside to make it burn longer. So, his punishment, he was made to serve as the living wick. Not dangerous, just strange. Each evening for 7 nights, he would stand in the square, holding a candle, but also wearing a tall wax-covered hat, shaped like a flame. Children would come and light their small lanterns from his candle. Each one whispered a wish, and moved on. He stood still, calm, like a lamp post. And when the last flame was shared, he bowed, and walked away. They said he never lied about candles again. Further down the street, we pass through a market that smells of fresh coriander and roasted barley. And here, in a corner stall, a man once sold salted fish labeled as fresh. His punishment? It was the fish a wooden mask, shaped like a fish's head, was gently tied to his own. It wasn't heavy, it didn't hurt, but it had a tiny door in the mouth. That little wooden flap opened when he spoke. So, to sell things, he had to lift the fish's lips. It looked ridiculous, but the people didn't mock. They asked questions, softly, and he answered, softly. And after a day, he took off the mask, washed his face, and sold real fish after that. Rome loved that. Punishment that touched pride, not flesh. Let's move now to a beautiful villa near the hills. There's a fountain here, and rows of rose bushes. Wealth and vanity. A young woman here had sent out false messages, love letters written under other names, just for fun. The punishment? She was given the ink mirror, a small bronze mirror. On the back, her own handwriting, etched in reverse, copied from one of her letters. She had to carry it for 3 days, and each morning, read her words aloud, backwards. It was hard. She stumbled, she blushed, but she learned. Afterwards, she wrote real letters, to real people. Words in Rome were sacred, even in love. Now let's slip through the narrow paths between apartment blocks. The insulae. In one of them lives an old man, who used to run a spice stall. He'd mix his herbs too cleverly, make low-quality blends seem exotic. So the punishment, the scent shuffle. He was given 12 small bags of herbs, real and fake, and told to arrange them in order, from most to least pure, in a plaza, with eyes watching. And each time he guessed wrong, he had to swap sandals with a passerby. After 6 mistakes, he was barefoot. He never guessed again, but that wasn't failure. That was honesty. He stood, shrugged, and said, I can't pretend anymore. And Rome forgave him. Let's wander to a schoolroom, where children learn to read Virgil's poetry, and the laws of the 12 tables. One boy here, clever and sharp-tongued, had copied his classmate's scroll, but denied it. So, his teacher assigned him to the silent scribe punishment. All day, he had to write a story, but not one of his choosing. The other boy, the one he copied, would whisper one word every 10 minutes. Only one, and he had to include it. He couldn't plan, couldn't guess. He had to build something, sentence by sentence, from words not his own. At the end, he read it aloud, and both boys smiled. It was strange, but beautiful. And the teacher nodded. The lesson was complete. Elsewhere in the Suburra, Rome's noisy district, there lived a street performer. He juggled coins and called insults at senators. Harmless fun. But once he mocked a sacred funeral chant. So his punishment, the echo bowl. For 1 hour, he had to sit in the center of a circle of singers. And every note they sang, he had to repeat, but only after a 5-second pause, which meant he was always behind, always echoing, never leading. People walked by, some laughed, some listened, but he learned what it meant, to follow rhythm, not break it. Now, let's climb a hill, where a small shrine to Vesta glows faintly in the moonlight. Vesta, goddess of the hearth, the flame, the home. There, a woman once stole firewood from the temple. She was cold, desperate, but it was still wrong. So her punishment, she was given a small clay lamp, unlit, and every evening, she had to carry it to a different home, not knock, not speak, just place it outside the door, and walk away. 20 lamps, 20 nights, and on the last night, she returned to the temple, and found her own lamp waiting, lit, warm, forgiveness. Rome had a way of folding you back into its arms, even after you'd stumbled, and now, we find ourselves near the edge of the arena, not inside, just near, where the armorers prepare gear, and scribes record battles. One of those scribes had faked a list, made it seem like a soldier had fought more duels than he had, to make him seem braver. The punishment, he was told to copy the names of every man who had died in the arena for the last year, but each name had to be written in the sand, by hand, with a stick, and each breeze wiped them away, so he had to start again, and again, until finally, he learned that names are not just letters, they are people, and people deserve truth. Let's take one more path tonight. One more turn, through the garden of a small temple, where orange trees grow in neat little rows. There, a boy once threw stones at birds, just for fun. He missed, but not always. The punishment, not cruel, but thoughtful. The priest gave him a bowl of grain, and said, "Wait here, be still, feed them back." So the boy sat, for hours, hand open, palm still. And the birds, they returned, cautiously, one, then two, pecking gently at the seeds. He didn't move, he just watched, and somewhere, he felt something soften, and that was enough. Now the stars are drifting west, the moon is fading, and the wind is so light, you'd think the gods themselves were sleeping. Rome still hums, softly, not with noise, but with memory, of masks, and candles, and birds, and bowls, and stories, that shape the soul. Sleep now, if you're still with me. You've walked through a dozen forgotten rooms tonight, and the stories will wait for you again tomorrow. Good night. The air over Rome tonight is cooler than usual. Not cold, no, just soft. It moves like silk between the columns, curls down narrow stairwells, brushes gently against the skin. It's the kind of night where footsteps echo, just a little more, where lanterns flicker slower, like they're listening. And that's exactly what we'll do too. Listen to more of these quiet punishments. These strange, thoughtful rituals that Romans used, not to harm, but to correct, reflect, and remember. Let's start near the aqueducts. Massive stone arms stretching into the horizon, carrying water from hills to city. Now, water was life in Rome. And tampering with it, that was serious. One merchant had blocked a local aqueduct pipe just to reroute a little stream to his garden fountain. Beautiful, yes, but forbidden. So his punishment. The dry cup ritual. Each morning for a week, he was handed an empty cup and told to stand by the aqueduct's mouth. The water roared behind him, but he could not fill the cup. He had to wait until someone came and chose to share their water with him. Only then could he drink. Only then could he feel what it meant to receive water properly. He never touched a pipe again. Now follow me to the cobbler's lane. A man here had sold sandals made with false soles. They looked thick, but wore down fast. And so, he was made to walk the measure path. Here's how it worked. A long, tiled walkway, marked every 10 steps with colored lines. Each line measured the wear of a true sandal. And as he walked, people watched and compared. His own sandals broke down fast. He limped, but kept going. At the end, he bowed and was gifted real soles, made by his rival. Even business had its honor, and Rome made sure of it. Let's shift now to a quieter place. A library, buried beneath a basilica, where scrolls live stacked in cedar-scented cases, and voices are always whispers. Here, a reader had removed a sacred poem from the shelf and annotated it with jokes in ink. Rome loved humor, but not at the cost of the poets. So his punishment, he was given the blank ode, a scroll of soft linen, blank, but titled with one of Horace's most famous odes. And he had to rewrite it, from memory, but he couldn't look it up, only listen. So for 3 days he sat, while poets whispered a single line to him every hour. Only one. And with that, he had to build the rest. By the end, his version was full of gaps, of silence, but somehow, still beautiful, like a half-remembered dream. Further across town, let's visit the market of colors, where dyes splash across linen, and hands stay forever stained. Here, a cloth seller had passed off walnut dye as purple, royal purple. That was nearly treason, so his punishment, he had to wear a robe dyed with every color except purple, layered, stripe after stripe, green, yellow, brown, rust, saffron, sky. The robe swirled when he walked. Children called him the walking sunset, and he wore it for 1 week. He sold only gray cloth after that. Let's take a breath. Now follow me to a vineyard, on the city's edge. A grape farmer here had falsely claimed his wine was blessed by a priest. People believed him, and bought. So, his punishment was called the grape lie. He was invited to a wine tasting, but not with nobles, with old men from the hills, farmers, veterans, masons. They sipped, and asked him stories, not about gods, but about grapes, where they grew, how the sun hit the hill, where the water came from, and if he faltered, they'd smile. Wait, let him try again. After 3 hours, they poured him a real cup and said, "Now drink like a man of the land." He drank, and never lied again. Now let's turn into a narrow alley of scribes. Stone tablets lean against walls, brushes rest in ink bowls, and the smell of charcoal lingers in the cracks. One young scribe had taken someone else's inscription, and signed it as his own. Not for money, just for praise. His punishment, he was given the shadow quill, a blank wax tablet, and a stylus that bent slightly at the tip. No one could read what he wrote, not even him. Each mark, slanted off the edge. Every line, twisted. But still he had to write. He wrote poems, letters, questions. None of them lasting, none of them saved. Only the sound of stylus on wax remained. Soft, satisfying. And after a week, he stopped stealing words, and began shaping his own. Let's walk now to a plaza, where a fountain in the shape of a dolphin whispers water down marble steps. A woman once spilled red wine into the fountain, by accident, she said. But the wine was cursed, meant to poison a rival's charm. Rome took fountains seriously. They were gifts to the gods. Her punishment, the drip seat, a carved stone bench beside the fountain. She had to sit and hold a bowl, collecting each drip, drop, 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 for 1 hour, without moving. If her hand shook, the bowl tipped. Start again. By the end, she sat straighter, breathed slower, and every drop felt sacred. She never touched cursed wine again. We turn now to a temple stable, where oxen rest beneath hanging oil lamps. There, a boy once tied a ribbon to an ox's horn, just for fun, but the ribbon was green, a funeral color. The priest saw it, and frowned. The punishment, the boy had to braid 5 memory ropes, each from different threads: wool, flax, horsehair, vine, gold string. While he braided, he had to name the animals of the temple, and what each one did. If he forgot, he started over. It took 2 days, but on the 3rd, he placed the ropes in the shrine, and the ox nuzzled his palm. Forgiven. Now drift with me, to the forum's edge, where statues line the roads like silent guards. A man here once painted the lips of a statue red, to mock a trial. The punishment, he was given the whisper stone, a round piece of marble, smooth, cold. He had to carry it in his mouth for 1 hour each day, but only while walking through the forum. Couldn't speak, couldn't laugh, just walk, and listen, to merchants, to judges, to children arguing over figs. He began to hear the weight of words, and learned that silence has shape too. Now we visit a clay potter's yard, shelves of urns, jars, cups, all made with care, except one potter used ashes from burnt parchment, mixed them into his clay. He said it gave texture, but the ashes were from sacred scrolls. The punishment, the ash jar. He had to make a single pot, from clean clay, but leave it empty, and place it in the sun. Then, every hour, he whispered into it a line of the scroll he burned. Only whispers, until the sun went down. He did this for 7 days. By the end, the pot remained silent, but he remembered every line, and never touched sacred ash again. Now we drift, through Rome's tannery district. Rough smells, rough hands. A man here had sold a pair of sandals, made from dog hide, unmarked, undignified. The punishment, the empty pair. He had to hang the sandals from a wooden post at the city gate, with a sign, "These have no story." For 3 days travelers passed. Some stared, some nodded, some said nothing. But the silence, that was the point. Every Roman item had a story, even shoes. And after 3 days, he carved his initials and gave the sandals to the Temple of Mercury as an offering. Now we wander to a river bend. Soft moss growing on the banks. A girl once skipped coins across the water, but not her own. Offerings, stolen from the shrine bowl. So, her punishment was the coin drift. She had to make paper boats. From prayers she wrote herself, and place a coin inside each. Then, she set them floating downstream, watching as they bobbed, and drifted, and vanished. By the end, her hands were wet. Her heart, softer. She whispered one final prayer, and kept her own coin. Now, to a doormaker's workshop, a quiet man carved doors. But one had a crack, and he sold it anyway. To a poor family, the punishment, he was given the hinge stand, a simple plank, a small bell. Every time the bell rang, he had to open an imaginary door, and say, "Enter honestly." He did this for a day. People watched. Some smiled. Some walked through. By sunset, he had made 5 new doors, all flawless. Rome is quieter now. Even the fountains seem slower. The punishments we've seen, they're not loud, not cruel. They teach. They shape. They wait. Like the city itself. Somewhere, someone is carrying a whisper stone. Somewhere, someone is collecting drips. Somewhere, a paper boat drifts into the dark, and the moon watches all of it. If you're still here, still listening, then maybe, let your breath slow now. Let your eyes drift closed. Let the next dream carry you, just past the forum, into a shop of lanterns, where the light never burns, but always glows. It's that time again, when the city begins to hum lower, as if whispering to itself. Even the gods seem to lean back in their thrones now, letting mortals settle down, letting stories breathe. Rome after dark is something else. You don't walk through it, you float, step by step, moment by moment, punishment by punishment. Tonight we begin in the shade of the launderer's quarter. It smells of warm water, chalk, and lye. Togas hang like soft sails from balcony lines. Now, one washer here had once returned a senator's robe still stained, pretended it was clean, said it had always been that way, but it hadn't. The punishment, the blindfold wash. Each day for 1 week, he had to wash cloth with his eyes covered, could only use touch, texture, weight. If he missed a stain, he had to start again. By the 5th day, he knew silk from wool just by breath, and the senator returned, smiling. Forgiveness came slowly in Rome, but it came. We slip now through the olive press barns, where the floor is slick and the air thick with pulp and oil. A young worker once stole a bottle of first press olive oil, didn't sell it, just wanted to taste it, but the oil was sacred, set aside for ritual lamps. So, the punishment, the silent pour, he was given a plain clay bowl, and a full flask of the oil. Each morning, he poured drop by drop, onto a stone plate. But if the stream broke, if the sound changed, he had to begin again. It took hours. The oil was thick, golden. He never touched it again, unless he was invited. And when he was, he poured it perfectly. Now come with me to the chess stones of the public square. Not real chess, but marble game boards carved into the pavement. Old men squat here in daylight, flicking pebbles, tapping fingers. One boy, eager to win, had carved a false move into the stone, shifted the lines, tricked a friend. The punishment, the shadow match. He had to play against himself. Every morning, 2 seats, 1 boy, 1 move per breath, no talking. If someone asked the rules, he had to explain, and admit, he played honestly after that, even when he lost. Now, we visit a bakery archway. You'll know it by the soft scent. Flour in the cracks of the brick. The warm puff of steam from underground ovens. A baker's apprentice here had once taken the burnt loaf, scraped it, and served it as fresh. No one noticed, until they did. So, his punishment, the crumble line. He had to sort crumbs. Yes, real crumbs, from finest to coarsest, but not by hand, by breath. He placed each crumb on a wooden tray, and blew. If it stayed, heavy. If it rolled, light. If it flew, ash. Each tray was marked. He did this for 6 days. By the end, he could tell a good loaf by scent alone. They say he baked better than his master after that. We wander now to a lantern path, near the river. A woman once claimed she could read fortunes, by candlelight. But all she did was guess. She frightened people, made lovers argue. So the punishment, the mirror flame watch. She sat each night with a candle, a small mirror behind the flame, and had to say nothing. Only sit, and watch, until the wick burned out. Sometimes 1 hour, sometimes 3, her own face in the flicker, shifting with each glow. She said later, she had seen 1,000 people in her own eyes, and none of them were lying. Now to the coin stamp house, where metal is poured into history. A forger had once pressed the wrong god onto a common coin. Not a crime, but disrespect. So, the punishment, the empty mold hold. He was given a mold with no backplate. He had to carry it, balanced, on one hand, and with the other, hold a blank coin. If either fell, he had to sit and hold them both on his knees until sunset. He learned quickly. Coins mattered, so did gods, even the little ones. Next we enter the garden wall of a school for girls. Painted benches, little ivory writing boards. One student had drawn faces on every board, some silly, some cruel. Her punishment, the ink trail. She dipped her finger in watered ink and touched it to each board she'd drawn on. 1 dot, each every morning. If she missed a day, start over. On the last day, the dots made a path, and she followed it with her eyes closed. Said she dreamed better after that. Let's step now to the fishmonger's cove. Rough men, slippery stones, and baskets that smell of brine and scales. One trader had said a fish was fresh, when it wasn't. It had been buried in salt for 3 days. The punishment, the salt whisper. He was given a satchel of salt, and told to walk from market to river, with the bag open, but he could only speak to answer questions, and only whisper. By the river, the salt was gone, and so was his lie. He whispered less after that, but when he did, he meant it. Now we find ourselves beneath a bridge near the Aventine. It sings at night, water echoing beneath stone ribs. A flute player had carved notes into the bridge wall, bad ones, wrong rhythms, not illegal, just lazy. So, the punishment, the note silence. He had to stand beneath the bridge, and listen, not play, just count the drip sounds, the echoes, the spaces between, each day for a week. And when he played again, the city paused. Even the water, shit. Now, all around us, Rome is breathing deeper. The sky is turning black-blue. Soft gold still glows from behind curtained windows. Everywhere, people are doing small things, holding bowls, listening to drops, counting crumbs, and learning, not through pain, but through pause. Rome knew punishment didn't need fire. It needed memory, ritual, time. So, if you're still with me, still resting, still listening, then maybe your thoughts are already walking the city. Maybe your hands are already brushing the stones. Maybe your breath is already lined with sandal dust. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to follow the coin into sleep. The sky above Rome tonight is silver. Not moonlight exactly, just that faint reflection of marble against the clouds. Everything feels cooler, quieter. You can almost hear the stars if you listen long enough. And while most eyes are closing, a few still wander, still remember, still carry the old rhythms of the city. Rhythms shaped not just by law, but by learning, by those soft, strange punishments that didn't scar the skin, just etched a lesson on the soul. let's begin. We return to a tiny garden, hidden behind a poetry school. The walls are covered in ivy. The benches still hold the shape of students' robes. One boy here had mocked another's poem, said it sounded like a goat sneezing. Everyone laughed, but the poet cried. So, the teacher gave the mocker the goat verse punishment. He was told to write 10 poems, each one about goats, but they had to be beautiful. Not silly, not cruel. He struggled. First verse was rough, second, clumsy, but by the sixth, he was writing about the curve of a horn in moonlight, about hooves in mist. By the 10th, the boy he'd mocked asked for a copy, and they walked home together. No one ever mentioned the sneeze again. We travel now to the glass blower's quarter. It's late, but you can still see warm light glowing like a heart from inside the furnace. One apprentice here had made a vase, with uneven sides. He knew it wasn't balanced, but sold it anyway. It cracked the moment someone touched it. The punishment, the water balance test. He had to make 10 glass cups, all the same, but not to look the same. They had to hold the same amount of water. Exactly. He poured, measured, adjusted, and when the 10th cup matched, he bowed. The master placed a rose petal in it. It floated perfectly. Further north, past the musician's corner, sits a small stairwell tucked between shop walls. Each stone step has a different tone when you tap it. One boy had painted the lowest one black, said it was cursed, scared younger children into climbing over it. Rome didn't like tricks that made children cry. So the punishment, he was given a soft drum, and told to sit on the black step, all day. Every time someone walked by, he had to drum a welcome, 1 beat. If a child walked past, 3 gentle beats. At the end of the day, the paint had worn off, and children danced past it freely. The boy, he gave the drum away, smiling. We now pass a leather bookbinding shop. Inside, a quiet woman once replaced a sacred page with a blank one, to hide a mistake, but that missing line held a blessing. So, her punishment, the line in the dark. Each night she sat in a candlelit room, only a tiny flame burning, and she wrote 1 line of the book, on the wall. No paper, just ink, just stone. When the candle burned out, she stopped. Next night, another line. Soon the whole wall was covered. People came to read, in silence. She never hid a mistake again. She just corrected it. Let's drift to the fruit market shadows. A man once told a woman that her figs were too ripe to sell. Not true. He just wanted the spot. She cried, and left. Rome didn't like marketplace cruelty. So, his punishment, the figs of fairness. He was given a basket of fruit, none perfect, some overripe, some green, and he had to sell each one, not for coin, but for kindness, a poem, a riddle, a smile, each fruit, a lesson. By evening the basket was empty. He bowed, and gave the last fig to a child who had nothing. Now we follow the winding stones toward a bathhouse boiler room. Warm, wet, echoing. A young boy had thrown stones at the bath walls, trying to make big splashes. He cracked a pipe. The bath cooled. No one was hurt, but the warmth vanished. So, he was given the steam sit, each morning for an hour. He sat near the source of heat, wrapped in cloth, and had to fold towels, one, then another, each with perfect corners. If the towel sagged, he started again. By the 4th day, his fingers were quicker, his folds smoother, and the water, warm again. We pause now near the statue of Mercury, god of messages and travel. A courier once skipped a delivery, a letter for a sick elder. He forgot, and then lied. So, the punishment, the empty scroll walk. He was given a blank scroll, tied with golden thread, and had to deliver it, every day, to the same doorstep. No one opened it, but he bowed, left it, and returned. 7 days. The elder never scolded, but on the 8th day, she waved from the window, and he smiled. Letter or not, he had finally arrived. Now drift into the honey seller's path. Sticky pots, sweet air. A girl had once dipped her fingers into the honey, meant for the temple lamp. Tasted it, lied. The punishment, the sticky thread. She wore a bracelet of twine dipped in honey, and was told don't touch it. If it frayed or stuck to her dress, she started over. She didn't eat honey for a month after that. But when she finally did, it was in front of the priest, and shared. Now we find ourselves by a bridge of wishes. Coins glitter beneath the arcs. One man had told children that if they threw in coins upside down, their wishes would vanish. He thought it was funny. Rome did not. So, he was given the wishing bell. Each time a child dropped a coin, he had to ring a small bell, softly, only once, and whisper, "Let it float." He did it for 3 nights, and when one child handed him a coin, and said, "You can wish too," he blinked, and rang the bell for himself. The sky above Rome is deep now, a shade of velvet blue, that only comes after the city has shared all its stories for the night. The streets are slower, the voice is lower, even the wind pauses, as if listening, and across the rooftops, you can almost see it, the weight of these strange, beautiful punishments. Not heavy, just thoughtful. Somewhere, a towel is being folded, a fig is being given away, a bracelet is sticking gently to cloth, and someone is learning, softly, without shame, without pain, just learning. If you're still here, then maybe you're learning too. Let go, breathe in, and drift. The wind tonight carries something different. It moves more slowly between the columns, dances more gently over rooftops. Even the cats seem quieter, as if they too remember. Rome is full of memory, but it never shouts it. It whispers, through statues, through fountains, through rituals done not to punish, but to remind. Tonight, let's begin near the rope maker's yard. Twisting cords, soaked hemp, and the creak of wooden wheels. A young man had rushed a commission, tied knots too loose. A scaffold rope broke during a theater performance. No one was harmed, but trust snapped. So, his punishment, the knot without pull. He was given 10 cords, and each day, he had to tie a knot that could hold its shape, without tension. No pulling, no tightening, just balance. By day 5, he tied them with his eyes closed. By day 7, he left one knot at the door of every actor in the troupe. Knots that held, knots that stayed. Theater went on, and so did he. Now we move quietly to a metal chaser's shop, where tools ring like wind chimes. One craftsman here had etched a bowl for a temple, but added his own initials. Tiny, almost hidden, but still, pride over purity. So, he was given the unseen mark. A bowl was placed before him, polished smooth, and he was told, "Leave your mark," but only one the gods can see. He worked for hours, not touching the surface, just thinking. At the end, he placed the bowl on the altar, and whispered his name, not carved, not written, just offered. Now follow the narrow lane past the perfume courtyard. Tonight it smells of rose water and burnt citrus. A girl had spilled someone's custom scent, laughed, said it was just smells. So, her punishment? The scentless trial. She had to go one whole day, without smelling anything. Nose sealed with waxed cloth. Food tasted dull. Streets felt flat. People passed her with flowers, oils, spices, and she couldn't tell. When the cloth came off, she wept, and bowed to the perfume maker. She never laughed at a scent again. Now we float down to the potter's bank by the Tiber. Clay drying in the moonlight. Soft footprints pressed into mud. One boy here had crafted a jug with 2 handles, but hit a crack beneath glaze. It shattered in someone's hands. Not violently, but suddenly. So, he was given the empty handle ritual. He had to make 10 jugs, each with 1 handle missing, and every jug had to stand steady, balanced, useful, incomplete, but enough. He worked through the night. When done, he gave them all away. People loved them. Sometimes, broken things are perfect too. Now we pass under the Arch of the Muses. 7 figures carved in stone, each holding tools of art and knowledge. One student had removed a scroll from the statue's base. A poem. He copied it, then claimed it was his. So, the punishment? The echo scroll. Each evening, he had to sit beneath the arch, and read poems aloud. Not his, just others. No applause, no audience, just his voice, and the stone faces listening. One night, he paused. and began reading his own, softly, then placed it back at the base. The muses said nothing, but the wind changed, just a little. Now let's wander to a quiet inkmaker's den, where glass bottles catch candlelight like tiny galaxies. One worker here diluted the pigment, to sell more. The punishment? The ink silence. She was given a quill, and told to write one word. Each hour, only one. No speaking, no erasing, only a single word, chosen carefully. At the end of the week, she had 7. They read, "Truth is thicker than water." She kept that bottle for herself, never sold it. We now drift by the marble polisher's court. Soft clouds of dust hang in the moonlight, like ghosts of stone. One man cut corners, filed rough edges, skipped a final sanding. No one noticed, until they touched. So, he was given the smooth stone rest. A single marble tile was placed outside the forum, and each day, he sat on it, still, until midday sun passed overhead. If he shifted, the tile was turned, rough side up. It took 3 days before he could sit in silence, without flinch. When he returned to carving, even his hammer fell quieter. Now followed to a clay mask vendor near the festival street. A child had painted a sad mask with laughing colors, called it funny, but someone wore it, and cried harder. So, the punishment? The unseen mask gaze. She sat behind a thin curtain, wearing the mask, and had to watch 10 people pass, but couldn't speak, couldn't move, just feel. She said afterwards, it felt like crying from behind a smile. She never painted one that way again. We rest now at the edge of the archives. A man here had once torn a page from a law scroll, to hide an old family fine, not to erase history, just to bend it. So, the punishment? The blank date binding. He was given a scroll, but no date, no title, just lines. And he had to copy rules from memory, each line a guess. When finished, he left it with the archivist. It was never filed, but it was read, and in time, he paid the fine, quietly, fully, without excuse. Now, Rome is dim. The lamplighters have passed. The last bread ovens are shutting, one by one. All over the city, people sit with silence, with stillness, with rituals of humility. These punishments, they didn't sting, they didn't scream, they asked only this: feel what was lost, see what was forgotten, fix it, gently. And so, even now, a student reads to stone, a bowl sits on an altar, holding nothing but a name. A girl smells the world again. And somewhere, a jug with one handle holds water perfectly. If you're still awake, then maybe your breath can hold a rhythm now. Your eyes can carry a stillness now. And your heart, might just be learning. Some nights, Rome doesn't feel like a city at all. It feels like a memory, a deep one, lying beneath the skin of time, and slowly breathing. You don't walk through it, you drift. And tonight, as the shadows grow longer, we drift into another soft corner of the city, where mistakes were mended, not with fire or chains, but with rhythm, reflection, and strange little rituals. Let's begin this night, beside a scroll maker's balcony, above a shop where reed pens soak in ink, and parchment curls softly at the corners. A scribe had copied a document incorrectly. It was a small mistake, but it confused a land boundary. A farmer cried. So, the punishment, the map without borders. He was given a piece of parchment, but told to draw a city, without any walls, no lines, just space, buildings, roads, wells, trees, but all open. He worked slowly. It felt strange. At first, every shape drifted into the next. But by the third night, his hand relaxed. By the fifth, he smiled, and said, I understand now. He redrew the land map for the farmer, perfectly. Now we slip into the loaf weaver's kitchen. Yes, loaves were woven too, especially braided ones for temple offerings. One girl here had rushed the braiding, tugged the dough too hard. It broke during baking. So, she was given the unbroken twist task. Each morning, she had to twist 3 ropes of fabric, dry cloth, and keep them whole, with no tears, no stretch marks, no folds out of place. But she had to do it with her eyes closed. At first the thread slipped from her hands, but by the fourth try, her fingers moved like water, braiding by feel, like remembering a dream. When she finally returned to dough, the bread looked like sculpture. Even the temple cook nodded. Now come with me to the shadowed corners of the theater's prop room. There, a boy had swapped the masks of joy and sorrow before a scene. He thought it would be funny. It confused the actors, made the audience uneasy. So, the punishment, the curtain turned. Each evening, before the show, he stood backstage and faced a single strip of curtain. He had to tune to every line, every cue, every breath of performance. But he couldn't look, couldn't peek, only hear, only feel. And when he finally watched again, he cried. Said the sorrow felt heavier, said the joy was brighter. The masks remained in their place, so did his respect. Now let's walk by the lamp oil vendor's little stand. One vendor had mixed olive oil with water to stretch it. It dimmed the flame of a sacred temple lamp. So, his punishment, the flicker count. He was given a single candle with a mixed wick, and each time the flame flickered, he had to tap a bowl, even through the night, even when sleepy. If he missed, start again. On the third night, the candle burned steady. He never mixed again. He also never slept through a storm. Now we travel near the terracotta pipe layers. A young man had fit a pipe loosely. It whistled each time water passed. It echoed through a home, even during sleep. So, he was given the whistle wall weight. He had to sit beside the faulty wall and tap once for every whistle. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Sometimes, nothing. Sometimes, 10 in an hour. But by the second evening, he could hear the fault before it sounded. By the third, he could fix it with clay and string. The whistle stopped, but the tapping remained in his dreams. We turn now into the smallest stall in the music quarter, where an instrument maker, tired and hurried, gave a lyre with a cracked string to a blind boy. The string broke that night. So, the punishment, the silent string binding. He was given 10 strings, and told to tune them by feel. No sound, just tension, touch, and guesswork. Each day, he tested one, blindfolded, until his fingers hummed with knowledge. On the 7th day, he gave the new lyre to the boy. It stayed in tune for years. Let's breathe now and visit a quiet place. A table maker's bench, where sawdust lives like snow. One craftsman shaped a leg shorter than the rest, and didn't fix it. A family sat crooked for weeks. So, he was given the unseen level. He was told to build a table, with no level, no measure, only coins. He had to slide coins under the legs, until the wobble was gone, then carve, and commit. The table turned out perfect. Even the father of the family nodded, and said, "This one doesn't argue with the floor." We pass now to a cool corner of a herbalist's apothecary. Soft jars lined the walls, labeled in faint ink. One apprentice had mixed up 2 roots. Not poison, but still wrong. Someone's sleep was troubled. So, her punishment, the jar shadow weight. Each night, she lit a lamp beside 10 jars, and watched them cast shadows. If she guessed the wrong jar from its shadow, she reset the row. She learned each shape, each bend of bottle, and when the herb was needed again, she didn't hesitate. She poured with both confidence and care. Now we slip past the laundry gate, where wet cloth dances on ropes like sails. One boy here had bleached the wrong set of garments, faded sacred priest robes. The punishment, the color return ritual. He was given dry herbs, red ochre, indigo, walnut, and a mortar, and told to match the original shade, without recipe, only memory, only effort. He crushed, stirred, tested. The color wasn't perfect, but it was true. The priest accepted it, and placed the robe in the festival procession anyway. Now the air begins to cool, the lamps are lower. Rome too begins to settle. Its punishment's not harsh. Not cruel, just careful. Each small task, a lesson. Each rhythm, a story. No chains, no shouts, only silence. And meaning. Somewhere, a girl braids cloth by memory. A boy taps beside a whispering wall. A table stands straight under coin-measured legs. And somewhere, a scribe draws a city with no borders. And it still holds shape. If you are still here, still breathing with us, still dreaming through this city, then maybe tonight, you're ready to drift too, gently, like oil on water, like parchment curling at the corners, like punishment turning into poetry. Even the stones seem to sigh tonight. There's something in the way the dust settles, softly, like it knows not to disturb. Rome never sleeps all the way, but it does listen, more carefully, when night deepens. Each whisper, each forgotten ritual, each quiet punishment, echoes through the marble like a heartbeat. Let's begin tonight beside the wool dyer's canal, where rivers run warm with soft colors. A boy here once switched dye labels, by accident, but it turned the robes of a funeral procession bright red. People wept, not in anger, but in confusion. He was given the color weight task. Each evening, he sat at the river's edge, with a single drop of dye, floating on a still bowl of water. He had to wait, until the color disappeared. No stirring, no blowing, just waiting. The day he stopped checking, was the day the color sank without a ripple. He nodded, and never rushed a label again. Let's slip now into the shadowed path of the letter engravers, where names are pressed into stone. One carver had chiseled too deep, and cracked a word, a name, someone's memory. So, his punishment? The name in air. He was given a set of soft reeds, and each day, he practiced carving into sand, with no pressure, just motion, just shape. When the wind blew, the names vanished. He did this for 7 days, and on the 8th, he asked the family if he could try again. They agreed, and this time, the stone didn't crack, and neither did the silence. We move now past a tiny fisherman's gate, where nets hang from old hooks, like sleepy birds. One man had borrowed another's net, without asking, used it in rough water. It tore, he didn't tell. So, the punishment? The net mend in fog. He was blindfolded, given soft twine, and had to repair a net, only by feel, only by knot, one thread at a time. He mended 3, and never borrowed again, without voice, and promise. Now step lightly into the great press caves. Cool air, quiet walls. Here a worker diluted a ceremonial wine. Not ruined, just weakened. So, she was given the slow crush task. Each day, she pressed a single cluster, with bare feet. 1, not 10, not a barrel full, just 1. Each drop caught in a cup. She did this for a week. When the final cup was poured, the priest drank, closed his eyes, and said, "This one tells the truth." She bowed. Let's pass through the paint mixer's alley. One young apprentice had painted over a teacher's mural, to practice. It was just one corner, but it erased a lesson. So, her punishment? The wall without image. Each night she painted with water. Not color, just water. Over dry plaster. Shapes that vanished before she finished. By the 6th night, she painted slower, so the image stayed, a few seconds longer. By the 7th, she didn't paint at all. She sat, and looked. Now we visit the quiet hill of the sky watchers, where elders track the stars. One assistant changed a date on a sky scroll, not from malice, just to impress someone, but the scroll was used to mark planting. The season started wrong, so he was given the star weight ritual. He had to sit from sunset to moonrise, and record only one star. No names, no guesses, just description. If he blinked, he had to start again. On the 5th night, he said, "It's not moving. I am," and the elder smiled. Let's follow now toward the bell maker's vault, where bronze hums even before its shape. One maker here forgot to file the inside of a small bell. It rang sharp, unclean. So, his punishment? The muffled tone weight. He wore the bell around his neck, but stuffed with cotton. It didn't ring. He walked slowly, remembering sound. Each time he passed someone, they listened for nothing. And after a week, he removed the cotton, rang it once. It rang true, and soft. We pass now to the ribbon weaver's perch, above the market square. One girl had measured ribbon too short, on purpose, to keep leftovers. So, she was given the silent ribbon stretch. Each morning she pulled a ribbon, gently, between two posts, until it was tight. If it tore, she began again. By the fourth day, she didn't pull, she breathed, and let the ribbon stretch on its own. The leftover, she gave to a child with tangled hair. Let's turn down a path toward the mosaic artist's court. One boy skipped a tile. Just one. He said, "No one will notice." But the face of a goddess was missing an eye. So, the punishment? The one tile walk. Each evening, he placed a single tile on a path he built for himself. No design, no pattern, just one more piece. Each step. After 10 days, he stepped back and saw a quiet image of a bird. Not planned, not perfect, but whole. Now, Rome exhales again, and the silence settles like dust on marble shoulders. Not because the city sleeps, but because it remembers. Each strange little punishment, each quiet reflection, each handmade ritual. They weren't cruel, they were careful, measured, like stitches on a wound no one can see. Somewhere, a name floats in sand, a ribbon is stretched without greed, a bell rings with no harshness, and a boy walks a path made of forgiveness. If your eyes are still open, let them rest now. Let your breath slow with the candles. Let your thoughts fade like murals in water, and let sleep, gently, find you like a single star, waiting to be noticed. The air tonight feels like velvet, not cold, just still. Even the fountains have quieted. The streets aren't empty, they're resting, and somewhere between moonlight and memory, the strange, beautiful rhythm of Roman punishments continues. Not loud, not cruel, but precise, designed to teach, without breaking. We begin this night near the olive oil stamp house, a small workshop tucked behind the orchard. One worker forgot to mark a batch. No stamp, no proof. The oil was pure, but the trust spilled. So, she was given the stamp without ink. Each day, she practiced pressing her seal onto dry parchment. No oil, no pigment, just the weight of the stamp. Learning pressure, feeling depth. By the 5th day, she didn't need ink. The mark was still there, invisible, but known. Now let's drift toward the weighmaster's booth, near the grain gates. A man had leaned on the scale during trade, just a little, enough to take a little more than his share. So, he was given the grain by breath task. Each morning, he poured a scoop of grain, then had to blow, softly, until only one kernel moved. Then scoop again. It took time, it taught care, and when he sold his next bag of barley, he said, "This weighs enough for 2 hearts." The buyer smiled. We step now into the shoestring district, where soft leather is twisted into bindings. A boy here had taken someone's sandals, just to run a race, returned them, but the straps were stretched, so, he was given the path without soles. Each morning, he walked the market road, barefoot, only during sunrise. One walk, quiet, each stone remembered. On the 5th day, he gifted the boy new sandals, stitched by hand. The soles were thicker, but the walk, still gentle. Now we pass into the pot healer's square, where broken vessels are mended with golden glue. One girl here had mocked a cracked bowl, said, "It's ugly now." The punishment? The crack count ritual. She was handed 5 mended bowls, each with different cracks, and told to find the longest one. Without using her eyes, only fingers, she ran her hands over the gold seams, each telling a story. By the end, she said, "They don't look broken to me." The healer nodded, and handed her the next one to repair. Let's drift to a quieter place now, the river lantern maker's shop, where lights float downstream on feast days. One apprentice added too much wax. The lanterns sank. So, he was given the float test weight. He built 1 lantern, each night, then had to wait until sunrise, to see if it floated. No weight added, no tests, only patience. After the 3rd night, his lanterns drifted softly, like dreams. Now let's pass through the broom weaver's corner. A girl had laughed while sweeping a shrine. She didn't mean harm, just didn't show respect. So, The punishment? The dust path ritual. She had to sweep the same line, again and again, until no dust remained. Not even air dust, not even memory of dust. She said on the sixth sweep. It felt like sweeping thought. On the seventh, she bowed, to the broom, to the shrine, to the silence. We now arrive near the bronze mirror polisher's station. A boy had held the mirror too long. Looked into it, not to clean it, but to admire himself. So, the punishment? The reflection, wait. He was told to hold the mirror, but turn it to the wall. Each day, same mirror, same hour, same grip, but no reflection. Only the weight of waiting. When he turned it back, he didn't look first, he polished first. And then, he smiled. Not at the glass, but at the shine. Now we step near the charcoal sketch walkway. One artist had added lines to another's drawing, just small ones, but unasked. So, she was given the shadow trace task. Each morning, she traced her own hand, without touching the charcoal, only with eyes, only with distance. When her eyes ached, she blinked, and tried again. On the fourth day, she drew someone else's hand, from memory, didn't add a line, just smiled, and left it there, softly. Now we stop at the baker's resting ovens. Still warm, still breathing doughy breath. One apprentice rushed the proofing. Bread came out tight, hard. So, he was given the rise with breath ritual. He sat beside the bowl, covered in cloth. Each time the dough rose even slightly, he whispered, one word, any word. A prayer, a poem, a name. By the third rise, he didn't whisper. He hummed. By the sixth, the bread came out smiling. Like the moon. Let's take a deep breath now. The sky above Rome is turning indigo, a kind of blue that only comes when no one speaks too loud. Somewhere, a mirror is being polished to no end. A broom is tracing the same dust line for the seventh time. A lantern floats slower than water. And a boy is learning to mark trust, without ink. These punishments, they weren't to silence people, but to awaken them, softly, so softly, that they thought it was their own idea. And maybe it was. If you're still here, still listening, then maybe you're learning too. Not from pain, but from pattern, from pause, from patience. Let your thoughts, float like grain, drift like water, rise like bread, fade like charcoal. Some corners of this city, scene made of silence. Old stones don't echo here. They hum, very low, very soft, like a memory folded inside a whisper. That's where we are tonight. Not in the loud Rome, but in the Rome that watches, waits, and teaches. Let's begin near the ink-stained library alcove, where scrolls sleep in linen wraps, and readers carry more questions than answers. One apprentice here had misshelved a scroll, twice. Simple mistake, but it delayed a scholar's work by 3 days. So, she was given the shelf without titles. Each morning, she was handed 10 scrolls, but no labels. She had to place them, not by name, but by weight, by smell, by the texture of the wrap. On the third day, she could sort them blindfolded, and when asked for a scroll later, she said, fifth from the left, second shelf. Smells like dust and sandalwood. She was right. Now we drift past the rope ladder builder's quarters. A boy had measured cord too short. A child couldn't climb it during a rooftop game. She slipped, not hurt, but scared. So, he was given the knot without measure. Each evening, he had to tie a ladder, without rope, just string, and hold it together in his hands. No nails, no wood, only knot by knot. He practiced in silence. By day 5, he tied blindfolded. He gave the string to the girl. She climbed the first rung, then hugged him. Let's slip softly to the ceramic cup vendor's steps. One man had taken a cracked cup and sold it at full price. The buyer never complained. But the cup did, by leaking slowly over weeks. So, the punishment, the drip weight bowl. Each day he filled a cracked bowl, one drop at a time, then waited until the last drop fell through. He wasn't allowed to move, just wait. He said, On the fourth day, this cup teaches more than I do. He never sold a crack again. Let's walk near the wax tablet scribe's room. One girl had erased a classmate's notes. As a prank, it melted years of work. So, she was given the message in heat. Each morning, she carved one word onto soft wax, then placed it in the sun, and watched as the word faded. She said the hardest part was not carving, but waiting, watching, learning how silence erases too. By the end, she gave her classmate a new tablet, blank, but warm. Now wander with me to the beam measures scale. Near the spice road, a worker here had tried to balance a scale with pebbles instead of beams. Faster, he thought, but not fair. So, his punishment, the pebble weight balance. Each evening, he dropped one pebble onto one side of the scale, and waited. When the scale tipped, he stopped, took it off, and tried again. No speaking, no notes, just balance. He said by the fifth day, my breath weighs more than a pebble. He was probably right. Let's drift now to the cloak dyer's racks. Near the temple wash, one boy used too little dye to save time. The color was uneven. It showed in the priest's robe. So, he was given the thread without shade task. He pulled thread after thread, all the same kind, then placed them on a pale cloth, under sunlight. If two looked different, start again. He learned that color lies until you look close. By the seventh day, his cloak poured like dusk. No priest ever frowned again. We pass now into the quiet tent of the salt grinders. One man sold salted figs with crushed stones in the mix. Not poison, but sharp enough to notice. So, his punishment, the grain-listen task. He was given a sack of salt, and had to separate the stone, only by sound, rubbing grain against grain. Feeling, listening, waiting. When he gave figs again, people chewed with trust and taste. Let's visit now the reed flute maker's shelter. A girl had made a flute too tightly sealed. No sound came through. A musician almost missed his song. So, she was given the flute of air task. Each day, she cut one reed, blew through it. No notes, just air. If it whistled, she carved again. If it stayed silent, she thanked it. By the sixth reed, it sang, and she smiled without sound. We now glide toward the chalk ledger scribes, where numbers fall like quiet rain. One apprentice had copied a total wrong. Too high. A poor man paid more than he owed. So, the punishment, the number of feet. He was told to walk from the market gate to the temple steps, counting only feet, every step, his own, others, birds, dogs. If he lost track, start again. By the third day, he said all steps are equal, only numbers forget. He repaid the difference, plus 1 coin, for balance. Let's end tonight's path. Near the stone gatherer's garden, where round pebbles are collected, for games, for balance, for wishes. One girl had taken them to decorate her courtyard, without asking. So, she was given the wish without stone. Each morning, she stood at the garden gate, and whispered one wish, but wasn't allowed to take a stone. By the seventh day, she whispered this, I wish the stones stay, then gave back a basket of her own pebbles, hand-polished, smooth, quiet. Now, Rome hums again, low and calm. Its punishments never roared. They whispered, and they always began with a small mistake. A small lesson, a small change. Somewhere, a scroll is sorted by its smell. A flute sings on its second breath. A girl watches her word melt in the sun. And a cracked bowl is filled again, drop by drop. If you're still listening, still awake, let your thoughts balance like scales. Let your memories soften like wax. Let your breath float like dye in water. The lesson isn't always in the punishment. Sometimes it's in the pause between actions, the patience, the stillness, and that might just be enough for tonight. Rome at this hour isn't lit by lamps, but by memory, the kind of memory that hums in the stones, whispers between the alleyways, and waits patiently in corners where no footsteps fall anymore. Some cities rest, Rome listens. Even its punishments still echo tonight, not through pain, but through presence and intention. Let's start softly, in the garden of dried herbs and worn baskets. A girl had rushed her picking, snapped the stems too hard. The lavender lost its scent. So, she was given the scent without touch task. Each morning, she sat with 3 bunches of herbs. Blindfolded, she could not touch, only smell, only breathe. She had to guess each one, only through air. She failed the first 2 days. On the 3rd, she whispered, "This one smells like rain on cloth." She was right, and the lavender returned, soft, still, and proud. Now let's drift to the silent hall of broken sandals, where straps are repaired with twine and patience. A boy here once used glue instead of stitch. It looked fine, until it rained. So, he was given the stitch without snap task. Each day, he stitched a strap. But if the thread snapped, he started again. He used thinner thread, lighter hands. By the 5th day, he said, "The strap holds me more than I hold it." He returned the sandal to its owner, still damp from morning dew, still perfect. Now we move to the parchment folder's table. A scribe had folded the edge wrong, too fast. The seal cracked. So, he was given the fold weight ritual. Each day, he folded paper, but couldn't crease it, only bend, hold, and release, over and over, until his hand knew where the fold should go, before it touched the sheet. By the 6th day, he sealed a letter with no break, no crack, only flow. Now past the fig presser's tent, where soft fruit turns into thicker sweetness. One worker pressed them too soon. The juice was bitter. So, he was given the wait until wrinkle task. Each morning, he picked 1 fig, and just waited until the skin wrinkled, until the sun softened the flesh. Then, and only then, could he press. By the end, the juice didn't just taste sweet, it felt wise. Now through a shaded alley, past the chalk tablet readers, a child had scribbled false answers on someone else's lesson, laughing, but it caused real confusion. So, the punishment, the answer without chalk task. She was asked a question, and had to answer using anything but chalk, stones, shells, fingers in dust. She tried everything. On the 4th question, she used shadows. She pointed at shapes, and everyone understood. The teacher nodded. The lesson stayed. Let's move softly now, to the mirror shard tent, where broken glass is turned into hand mirrors. One apprentice had dropped a shard, and blamed the wind. So, he was given the wind weight watch. Each evening, he stood beside the window, with a single shard in his hand. If the wind moved it, he had to wait longer, but it never did. He learned, the wind doesn't always take blame. Sometimes, it just watches. By the 6th night, he said, "I dropped it." No anger came. Only another shard. And a chance. Let's pause by the reed boat builder's dock. A man had sealed a joint with too much wax. It melted in the sun. The boat sank halfway through the river. So, he was given the melt without flame task. Each day, he placed wax near a candle, not touching, only waiting, watching, learning how heat moves through the air, not just the surface. By the 3rd day, he sealed another boat. The wax held, even under full sun. Now, through the lute stringer's steps, one girl had left a knot in the string that buzzed during songs. She didn't notice. So, the punishment, the buzz wait pause. She played each string, very slowly. If it buzzed, she stopped, paused, did nothing, only waited, until the sound left on its own. She said, "I didn't fix the string. The string fixed itself. I just got out of the way." She was right. Now, we go past the bread scorer's hearth. One boy had cut the dough too deep. The bread tore. It baked uneven. So, he was given the cut without crumb ritual. Each day, he scored the dough, but couldn't bake it, only see how the cuts opened, and how they healed, before heat. On the 5th day, the dough rose with grace, like it forgave him. The baker nodded, and said nothing, which was everything. Let's step now into the coin polisher's nook. One apprentice polished too hard. The image on the coin faded. So, he was given the polish without pressure task. Each day, he held a coin, and breathed on it. Only his breath, no cloth, no motion, just warmth and time. The coin didn't shine, but it glowed. On the 7th day, he was told, "That's enough," and he smiled. Now Rome feels very still, almost listening. Each punishment, a pause, a whisper, a lesson that drips into the soul, not through shame, but through shape, and waiting, and care. Somewhere, a fig is wrinkling just right. A scroll is folding without breaking. A boat floats under sun, and a girl finds an answer in shadow. If you're still here, still breathing softly with this story, then maybe tonight, you're learning the rhythm of mistakes, the beauty of stillness, and the softness of being wrong gently. Can you feel that soft hush in the air? It's not wind, it's Rome's oldest voice, the one that doesn't shout. It only waits, and watches, and sometimes corrects, in ways you'd never expect, because not every lesson is loud. Some are as soft as a thread pulling through linen. Let's begin tonight at the needleworker's loft, where cloth breathes, and patterns whisper themselves into shape. One young girl had stitched too tight. The fabric puckered. It was meant for a wedding. So, she was given the thread without pull task. Each day, she threaded her needle, but didn't sew, just passed it through air, back and forth, until the movement felt like breath. On the 4th morning, she stitched again. The cloth stayed flat. She whispered, "It's not the needle's fault," and smiled. Now let's walk softly past the stone water drainers, where canals are kept clean with quiet tools and patient hands. A man had let leaves pile too high. Water backed up, flooded a home. So, he was given the drip weight seat. Each evening, he sat on the canal ledge and counted drips. Not raindrops, just steady ones, until he could name them by sound. Leaf drip, roof drip, wall drip. By the 7th night, he could hear a blockage before it formed. He cleared it before sunrise, and left no trace. We drift now to the lamplight matcher's alcove. One boy mismatched oil mixtures. Some lamps burned too bright. Others flickered out. So, he was given the burn without wick task. He lit no lamp, only sat in front of the empty one, and imagined its glow. Eyes closed, hands still, breathing as if there were fire. After 7 nights, he relit the first lamp, and said, "It burns softer now," and it did. Let's visit the grain sifter's barn now, where fine dust dances in sunlight. One worker shook too fast. The flour was clumped. So, she was given the sift with wind task. Each morning, she opened the barn doors, held up a handful of grain, and let the wind sort it. She stood still, watched, waited, learned. By the 6th day, she could feel where the dust would settle before it fell, and her next bag of flour poured like silk. Now follow me to the bead stringer's edge, where jewelry is made with patience, not sparkle. One girl had skipped a bead. The pattern was off. She didn't notice until it was worn at a feast. So, she was given the bead without hole task. Each day, she chose one bead that had no hole, and just held it, felt its weight, its shape, its silence. After a week, she restrung the necklace, slower, and left one bead untouched in the center. They called it the bead that listens. We now drift to the shademaker's corner, where curtains are dyed to block out Rome's fierce sun. A boy had cut the cloth too short. Light leaked into a reader's room. So, he was given the shadow map task. Each day, he stood under a tree and traced its shadow every hour until the sun moved past. By day 5, he said, "Light doesn't move. It waits for us to turn." He returned to his cloth, cut the curtain again, and it hung like a moonless night. Let's walk carefully now to the coin weight checkers. A clerk here had slipped in a lighter coin, not stolen, just lazy. So, his punishment, the palm balance weight. Each evening, he held 2 coins, one in each hand, no scales, just breath, stillness, feeling, and every time the heavier one felt lighter, he flipped them. By the 6th evening, he said, "They both weigh honesty now." Now move with me toward the rope twister's shed, where long strands sleep until they're twisted into strength. One apprentice had tied two fraying ends together. The rope broke during a merchant sign, so he was given the strand listen task. He took one thread, wrapped it around his finger, and pulled. If it snapped, he tied it again, gently. By the fifth thread, he didn't pull, he let it rest, and it didn't snap. The next rope held fast, even in rain. Let's pass by the leather stretcher's bench. A girl once pulled too hard, the leather tore, so she was given the stretch without strain task. Each morning, she held a strap and whispered to it, pulled slowly, but never to the edge. She learned where the limit was, without testing it. By the seventh morning, she stitched it into a saddle. The horse didn't flinch, the rider smiled. Now through the quill maker's corner, a boy had trimmed a feather too short. The ink splattered, ruined a title page. So, he was given the featherweight hold. Each day, he held a feather upright, balanced on two fingers, eyes closed, breath steady. When it tipped, he began again. On the sixth day, it didn't fall. He dipped it in ink, and signed only one word: stillness. So much of Rome lives in these forgotten lessons, these soft punishments, these silent rituals. No shouts, no chains, just repetition, reflection, balance, and breath. Somewhere in the city, a feather waits to tip. A bead sits alone, a rope holds, because it wasn't tested too fast, and a lamp glows softly, because someone remembered how quiet light can be. If you're still here, still awake, then maybe you're learning the same way Rome did. Slowly, gently, one mistake at a time, corrected by patience and breath. The sound of the city tonight isn't sound at all. It's the hush between sounds, the stillness that holds every step, every forgotten lesson. Rome knew how to be loud, but it also knew how to correct a soul without ever raising a voice. Let's listen to that silence again, as it tells us things only the quiet can reveal. Let's begin in the soft twine shop, where cords are braided into belts, and each loop tells a rhythm. A young boy here twisted too fast. He rushed the knots. The belt unraveled on its own. In front of a crowd, he wasn't scolded. He was given the knot without purpose task. Each day, he tied a knot with no object in mind. No belt, no tool, just loop, after loop, after loop. By the sixth morning, he said, I tied my thoughts together, and that day, the knots held. Let's move quietly to the chalkboard teacher's corner. A girl had drawn a diagram wrong, and left it up. A dozen students copied the error. So, she was given the erase without hands ritual. She stood by the board, but couldn't touch it, only had to watch, until wind, or time, or footsteps nearby, shifted the chalk off on its own. Sometimes, she had to wait hours. By the third day, she said, I erase more with waiting than I ever did with scrubbing. Let's float over to the quiet spoon carver's stall. One man shaped a handle too thin. It snapped in a warm bowl of barley, so he was given the grip without touch. Each day, he watched a spoon carved by someone else. He wasn't allowed to carve, only to observe the hand, the angle, the pressure, the patience. On the sixth day, he carved again. The handle curved like a question mark, and held like an answer. Now the bread counter's shade. One boy lost track. The bakery was off by 2 loaves. So, he was given the count without number task. Each morning, he watched loaves rise, but wasn't allowed to count them. Not allowed, not in his head, only with motion. He followed the rise, the swell, the color. By day 5, he said, the oven told me how many, and the bread matched the names on the scroll. Let's pass by the quilt stringer's flat. A girl stitched too close to the edge. The corner lifted, so she was given the edge without thread ritual. She sat with the quilt, but couldn't sew it, only had to press it with her palm, until it stayed. At first, it lifted, again and again. By the 4th morning, she didn't press, she breathed on it, and it held. They let her finish the quilt. The corner was still. Now let's visit the ladle shaper's forge. where heat molds curves into metal spoons for stew and soup. One apprentice cooled the bowl too fast. It cracked. So, he was given the bowl without flame task. Each evening, he sat beside an unlit forge, held the shape of a ladle in his mind, and warmed his hands on his breath alone. He said by the seventh night, I no longer rush the cooling, because I feel it inside me first. And the next ladle he shaped, held broth like a cradle. Let's move now to the honey tester's hut. One girl tasted too much from one jar. The balance shifted. So, she was given the taste without tongue. Each day, she opened a jar and smelled. Only smelled. She wasn't allowed to taste. Only guessed sweetness by scent. By the fifth jar, she whispered, this one tastes like warm hay. She was right. And the jar was shared, drop by drop. Let's walk slowly now, to the bookbinder's shadows. One boy had glued the spine too stiff. The book cracked when opened. So, he was given the fold without force. Each evening, he held a scroll closed, and waited for it to open, on its own. No pressure, no hands, only time, sunlight, warmth. On the sixth scroll, it opened just before dusk. He nodded, and never cracked another book. Let's pause at the bird call flutist's path. One apprentice made a reed pipe that called the wrong birds. So, she was given the wait for sound ritual. Each morning, she blew gently into the pipe, but not to create sound, only to feel the space between silence and breath. On the seventh morning, a bird landed nearby, not because of the song, but because of the stillness. Now we find ourselves in the map marker's atrium. A man once marked the wrong bend in a road. It confused a caravan for a full day. So, he was given the bend without ink task. Each evening, he traced a road in air, with his finger, eyes closed. Only memory, only motion, no ink, no quill. By the fifth night, he could trace every curve of the Appian Way, from gate to sea, and never forgot again. Rome never forgot, but it also didn't punish just to punish. It paused, breathed, watched, and waited. Somewhere, a spoon curves quietly, a ladle waits for heat, a scroll opens without hands, and a girl finds flavor in the air alone. These are the punishments that change people, not through shouting, but through the kind of silence that teaches more than any voice ever could. If you're still here, still breathing, still drifting, let your thoughts float like chalk dust, curve like a quiet thread, and rest like unbaked bread, waiting for its rise. You don't need to count your mistakes, just notice them, and let time fix the fold. We've been here a long time, haven't we? Walking the soft steps of a city that taught not with fire, but with patience, not with fear, but with form. And maybe, just maybe, this last part of our journey takes us somewhere even quieter than silence itself. Let's begin tonight, beside the ink water collectors. A boy once poured used ink water into the aqueduct channel. It didn't harm anyone, but it stained the wall nearby. So, he was given the clear water watch. Each day, he sat by the stream and waited for the last stain to wash away. It took 6 days. He never poured ink again. He said, water carries everything, even the things you hope it forgets. Let's drift toward the grain patterner's tent. A girl had scattered the seed patterns too wide. The wind took them out of reach. So, she was given the scatter without distance. She wasn't allowed to toss seed, only drop, one grain at a time, from waist height, onto sand, and then trace the fall lines with her fingertip. By the 6th row, the wind stopped touching them. She whispered, I plant better when I stay close. Now we pass through the bull stacker's hall. One boy stacked too high. They fell. None broke, but the sound woke the infants. So, he was given the soundless stack. Each morning, he stacked bulls, but had to do it without making a sound. Not one. On the 4th day, he stacked 10, then stepped back. Even his breathing was quiet. And the infants, they slept through it. Now over to the mirror polisher's lane, where light reflects from copper, more softly than glass. A worker once polished until the reflection was too sharp. The priest refused to look into it. So, the punishment? The dull shine practice. Each day, he polished but stopped before the mirror gleamed. Just before, where it only hinted at a face. By the seventh mirror, he said, "Now it reflects what matters, and leaves out what doesn't." The priest nodded, and saw only his eyes. Let's go to the perfume weigher's shade. A girl once dropped too much oil into a vial. The balance was off. So, she was given the drop weight count. Each day, she let one drop fall, just one, and waited until the scent settled. Only then could she release another. By day 5, she whispered, "Smell is slower than sound," and her next blend hung in the air like a thought. Now to the scroll ribbon tears bench. One man tied a ribbon too tight. The scroll cracked on opening. So, he was given the loose wrap ritual. Each morning, he wrapped cloth around his own wrist, only loosely, then removed it, and left it on the bench. By the 7th day, the cloth stayed curled, even without the wrist. That day, he tied the ribbon, without pressure, and the scroll sang when opened. Now we follow the shadows, to the silent drum keepers. A young apprentice once struck the drum too soon. Before the dancer's step, it threw off the rhythm. So, she was given the beat weight watch. She sat each night, watching others, not allowed to strike, only to breathe, in time, with the dancer's feet. On the 6th night, she didn't drum, she hummed. The dancers moved, perfectly. Now we float to the chalkbox recorders, where traders note every item exchanged. One girl recorded a fish when it was actually bread. An accident. Still, she was given the mark without meaning task. Each day, she made one mark, a shape, a swirl, a line, but not for numbers, only breath. By the 5th box, she could see numbers and shapes, and never mismarked again. Let's move now toward the sleep nook reed fillers, where quiet beds are lined with dried reeds, to rest the back. One boy once laid them wrong. They poked through the cloth, so he was given the rest without reed. Each night, he laid on wood, no cushion, only stillness. By the 6th night, he said, "It wasn't the reed, it was my way of lying." He adjusted. The next bed he made, put an old soldier to sleep, in under a minute. Now near the rain catcher's courtyard, a girl tipped a jar too early, lost half the water, so she was given the wait for drop. She was not allowed to collect rain, only to listen for it. She stood beneath the overhang, waited for the first drop, then walked away, not collecting, just listening. On the 7th day, she said, "The first drop is the whole storm." And now, here we are, at the end, but not quite. Because Rome never really ends. It lingers, like the quiet after a whisper, like the warmth in a stone, after the sun has set. Somewhere, a girl is still watching her scroll open without force. A boy is listening to rain, without reaching for a jar. A mirror reflects just enough. A bowl stacks without a sound. A dancer waits for the drum. And you've walked with them all, step by step, breath by breath. If you are still awake, then I think you have to see the video from minute 17, or play this side video, as maybe it can help you sleep even better.